What if Luffy unlocked Gear 5 on Egghead instead of Wano? We're talking about a what-if scenario, where Luffy beats Kaido without Gear 5, and the Gear 5 transformation doesn't actually happen until the Elders are already on Egghead. Of course, this would switch things up a lot, but hear me out, because this story is going to be insane. Starting with the obvious, how the hell is Luffy going to defeat Kaido? Now, before we answer this, it's important to clear up an important misconception about Luffy's Devil Fruit. It doesn't give him more attack potency or the power of imagination. What it does is that it gives him unparalleled versatility. For example, a punch that comes at you like a whip is obviously going to hurt you more than a regular punch, right? That's why Luffy was already strong enough to be able to go toe-to-toe with Kaido even before Gear 5. However, unlocking Gear 5 gave Luffy the ability to contain Kaido by manipulating the environment and even the ability to turn Kaido himself into rubber. Just like that, Luffy became able to fight in a way that is impossible to comprehend. As for Bajrang Gun, it's basically Luffy amplifying King Kong Gun by adding volume and enlarging it to the point where he was able to hit Kaido with just enough force necessary to send the man straight into the magma pit. When you think about it, this is what Luffy has always done with his gears. He has outdone his enemies by using the rubber properties of his body. He adds acceleration to his attacks by stretching his arms way back. He amplifies his attack potency by adding volume to his fist. He can always bend and stretch in new ways to catch his opponent by surprise. Now with Gear 5, he can do the same while also simultaneously ignoring the laws of physics. So going back to the fight with Kaido, if we scale the beast down a bit, give Luffy a bit more stamina, and make it so that the CP0 agent never intervenes, then this is how the final clash would go. Just like he did in Chapter 1042, Luffy would prepare Gomu Gomu no Over Kong Gun. We're talking about an enhanced version of the Gomu Gomu no King Kong Gun that is infused with Luffy's most powerful Conqueror's Haki yet. It'll connect because we've made Kaido a bit weaker than he was in the original story. This means that Kaido would be at a similar level of fatigue and exhaustion as Luffy. Now, when the Over Kong Gun connects, what happens next is that both Kaido and Luffy fall from Onigashima. Luffy yells at Momonosuke to hurry it up and bring out the flame clouds because the moment Kaido is knocked out, Onigashima would also fall. The moment of the fall and the weight of Luffy's Over Kong Gun keeps Kaido from transforming into a dragon. And then, as fate would have it, both Kaido and Luffy end up falling into the exact same hole as what Law created for Big Mom. Luffy uses his stretch feet to grab onto the edge of the ground and pulls himself out, just as Kaido hits the lava at the bottom. The next thing you know, Luffy is seen standing on the ground, heaving heavily and breathing a sigh of relief because in the heat of the moment, Momonosuke succeeded in slowing down the fall of Onigashima just like how he did in the original manga. The battle is over. Luffy won. He collapses while Zunesha leaves after Momonosuke makes the decision not to open Wano's borders, at least not yet. Everyone rejoices. Fast forward to 3 weeks later. Everyone's bounties are going to be the same as they were in the original story. The only difference is that Luffy's poster photo will not be featuring Gear 5. Next, we'll move on to Egghead and build a scenario where Luffy awakens his fruit at the perfect time in the context of the Egghead arc. But first, I want to elaborate on why the CP0 agent didn't interfere in this alternate reality. It's because, for this what-if scenario, we're going to assume that the 5 elders simply didn't know that Luffy had eaten the Gomu Gomu no Mi. Think about it. Have the elders ever seen Luffy in person before Egghead? Have they ever seen any footage of his fights? And more importantly, how likely is it that they are told the name of the devil fruit of every up-and-coming pirate? In the original story, we can assume that the elders learnt about what fruit Luffy had eaten while getting the specifics of what's going on at Onigashima from CP0. However, as for this alternate reality, we're assuming that they still have no idea even as Luffy goes on to defeat Kaido. Seriously though, the number of characters in One Piece who know the truth about Luffy's fruit are likely less than 10. This is why nobody is just going to walk up to the elders and say, "No way, this legendary rookie who is also a D-Clan member has eaten the Gomu Gomu no Mi. We're finished. We're cooked." In Egghead, there's still going to be Luffy versus Lucci, but it's going to be more of a fist fight where Luffy overwhelms Lucci using attacks like Red Rock. When Vegapunk sees the fight, he'll make a comment about how the Gomu Gomu no Mi devil fruit actually doesn't exist in the older devil fruit encyclopedia. But it would be nothing serious because Luffy still hadn't awakened. The rest of the arc will play out similarly. The Straw Hats would capture York like they did in Chapter 1089, and the next plan of action would be to set out to Egghead. But of course, This is the point in the story where Luffy vs. Kizaru happens. Though before we continue, if you're enjoying this video and would love to see more such content, how about giving the video a like and also subscribing to the channel, guys? Here at AJAnime, we make quick yet in-depth videos on all things anime. Just roll with it and I'll promise you a good time with each coming video. Now, getting back to the story, we have Snake Man Luffy versus Kizaru. The fight would be much more intense than it originally was, especially because Luffy won against Kaido thanks to the right attack at the right time. It's going to be an insanely tense situation where Luffy will have to lock in and go hardcore to make sure that whatever happens, Kizaru doesn't go after anyone, because unlike Gear 5 Luffy, if Kizaru jumps his crewmates or Vegapunk, Luffy may not be able to catch him. Meanwhile, Kuma would be on his way to Marijo. Finally, Saturn would step onto Egghead while Luffy and Kizaru are going extreme diff against each other. In the original story, Luffy ran out of gas for Gear 5 and was out cold until chapter 1106. But here, Luffy and Kizaru will be in a stalemate. They will be a safe distance away from the spot where Saturn appears, but at the very moment where Bonnie jumps Saturn and stabs him, we'll see a scene where Kizaru is sent flying by Jet Culverin, and he lands right next to Saturn. Of course, this attack won't be at the level where Kizaru can be incapacitated, which is why Luffy would rush to where Kizaru was sent flying. Seeing Luffy, Saturn asks himself, wait, is that rubber? Luffy sees him holding Bonnie tightly in his hand and immediately attacks Saturn with Gomu Gomu no Culverin. He simultaneously yells, "Who the hell are you?" Saturn dodges, but Culverin shifts its direction and hits Saturn anyway. Gomu Gomu? Saturn questions after hearing Luffy say the technique's name. His grip on Bonnie loosens, and Frankie catches her with Strong Right. This is where Saturn, one of the 5 elders, will realize that Straw Hat Luffy, one of the most prominent members of the D-Clan, as well as a pirate who defeated Kaido, the King of Beasts, has actually eaten the Gomu Gomu no Mi. Saturn panics because he knows the fruit's true name. He knows that it's actually Hito Hito no Mi, model Nika. Kizaru, go and get rid of Vegapunk. I'll take care of him, Saturn yells. Kizaru rogers that and blitzes away at the speed of light. No, don't, Luffy yells, but he can't just ignore Saturn and chase Kizaru because he can sense just how much of a threat Saturn is. Don't worry, Luffy. I'll go after Kizaru, Sanji says. Luffy nods and comes face to face with Saturn. I can't believe you, of all people, ate the Gomu Gomu no Mi, Saturn asks. I asked, who the hell are you? And what do you want? Luffy asks back. Well, soon it won't matter anyway. Straw Hat, you shall die, and this island itself will be erased from history. A battle between Luffy and Saturn begins, and as expected, Saturn keeps regenerating while Luffy keeps losing stamina. He intends to kill Luffy, but of course, even though Luffy doesn't have Gear 5, he is still strong enough to the point that Saturn himself cannot possibly kill him. However, what happens next changes the tune of everything. It's Vegapunk. His words state, and I quote, "Many of you will be shocked by this, but I assure you that it is the truth of the world." Exactly. Sanji fails to keep Kizaru from killing Vegapunk, and the transmission begins. Saturn immediately summons the rest of the elders to stop the transmission, to kill Luffy, and to destroy Egghead while securing the Mother Flame, the Pacifistas, and the Seraphim. What we see next is a scene from a nightmare. Exhausted and battered, Gear 4 Snake Man Luffy is seen standing up to the 5 elders. Unfortunately, he only lasts a few more seconds. Luffy finally loses the Gear 4 steam and reverts back to his base state. He stumbles a little, but regains his footing and uses Conqueror's Haki to intimidate, but the 5 elders then used their Conqueror's Haki at once to blow him away. Frankie catches him, but it's clear that Luffy is at the end of his limit. Now, Warcury, Jupiter, and Saturn stay behind to deal with Luffy. Nezjuro stops the Pacifista, while Mars gets in touch with Lucci to find the snail and stop the broadcast. As for Kizaru, Zoro and Sanji take him on. Saturn attacks Luffy with his claws, but Bonnie comes in clutch with her distorted future Nika punch and stops Saturn from skewering Luffy. For the sake of context, this is the same punch that little Bonnie used on Alpha in the flashback. Of course, Saturn grabs Bonnie again and is about to kill her when Kuma appears and punches the absolute living daylights out of Saturn. We're talking about the same punch he did in chapter 1104, a punch that'd make even Garp proud. He saves his daughter, and the two of them have their heartfelt reunion, but Warcury and Jupiter just can't let them have their moment. They both attack Kuma and Bonnie at the same time. Luffy springs into action. He uses the last of his strength to try to counter Warcury's attack with Red Rock. Frankie, on the other hand, blasts Jupiter with his Radical Beam. Unfortunately, Luffy's attack hurts him instead of Warcury. Warkiri slams him with a Conqueror's Haki coded tackle, and that's when it finally happens. Luffy couldn't physically go on anymore, and that's why his heartbeat stops. Bonnie and Frankie cannot believe their eyes. Even the Straw Hats that weren't even present at the scene sense a dark chill run down their spines. But as they say, it's the darkest before the dawn. Right as everything seems hopeless, the drums of liberation begin, and the sun finally rises on Kuma's life. Luffy's haki is felt throughout Egghead. The Straw Hats breathe a sigh of relief. The Five Elders panic. Emmett, the ancient robot, awakens. He says, and I quote, "Joy Boy, is that really you?" Meanwhile, Kuma and Bonnie watch in pure awe as Luffy's Nika form shines brightly in the sky. The two of them break into tears as they witness the brilliance of this moment. It is sentimental enough to free Kuma and Bonnie from all of their suffering. Dum ta-ta, dum ta-ta. Sun God Nika, he really exists. And with that said, guys, these were my thoughts on what if Luffy unlocked Gear 5 on Egghead instead of Wano. I'm sure you have a lot to add to this, so let's continue the conversation in the comments section below. If this video takes off and gets over 1,000 likes, you bet we're going to do a part 2 and even a part 3. Just make sure you start spamming that like button, guys. Of course, also subscribe to our channel, AJAnime, and hit the bell icon so that you're the first to know whenever I cook up something new and exciting. Honestly, as much as I love the manga, it's always fun to speculate on how things could have turned out differently. Let me know if you guys have any other ideas you'd like to see. We can still get much, much higher.